Savage, Edgar Fulton spat, his boots crushing sacred herbs as he shoved Hinto to the Wyoming dirt. Kohana's heart roared with fury, his knife flashing to shield his gasping son, whose frail chest heaved under the dawn sky. Flames of accusation scorched the Shoshone plateau, threatening to burn their world to ash. Kohana, a 32-year-old Shoshone warrior, tends horses under the vast Wyoming stars of 1900, haunted by the loss of his wife to a militia's bullets. His son, Hinto, only 10, fights a weakening heart in their harsh world, needing medicine Kohana can barely afford. Caught between guarding the sacred Shoshone plateau from encroaching white ranchers and proving his loyalty to a wary tribe, Kohana walks a razor's edge. His alliance with Laura, a white lawyer, stirs distrust among his people, while a chilling secret about a plot to poison the land with diseased cattle drives him to risk everything for his son and their heritage. The dawn air was crisp on the Shoshone plateau, and Kohana knelt beside Hinto, his calloused fingers guiding his son's small hands to a cluster of sage. "Feel the leaves, Hinto. They carry our prayers," he said, his voice low and warm. Hinto's eyes sparkled, but a faint cough broke his smile, his thin chest shuddering. Kohana's heart tightened, masking his worry with a gentle nod. He pointed to a hawk circling above, its wings slicing the pink sky, and said, "That's a good sign. Our ancestors watch us." Hinto reached for another sprig, his fingers trembling from effort, and Kohana steadied him, pride swelling despite the fear gnawing at his gut. As they worked, Hinto whispered, "Will I be strong like you, Papa?" Kohana pulled him close, his rough cheek brushing Hinto's hair, and murmured, "You're already stronger." The moment felt sacred, the plateau's silence wrapping them in peace. But Kohana's gaze darted to the horizon, wary of intruders. He tucked a sprig behind Hinto's ear, forcing a smile to hide the weight of their fragile world, where every breath Hinto took felt like a borrowed gift. Hooves thundered, shattering the morning's calm, and Edgar Fulton's voice cut through like a blade. "You're on my land, savage," he barked, leading a pack of grim-faced militiamen. Kohana stood, shielding Hinto, his jaw tight as he met Fulton's glare. "This is Shoshone ground. We're gathering herbs for ceremony," he said, voice steady but edged with defiance. A militiaman sneered at Hinto's woven tunic, muttering, "Filthy Indian rags." Fulton's eyes narrowed on Hinto, who clung to Kohana's leg, and he scoffed. "That weakling's no use to anyone." Kohana's fists clenched, heat rising in his chest, but he forced himself to breathe, knowing a wrong move could doom them. Hinto's small hand squeezed his, trembling, and Kohana's heart pounded, torn between rage and the need to protect his son. The militiamen's rifles glinted in the dawn, their boots trampling the sacred herbs Kohana and Hinto had gathered. Fulton stepped closer, his shadow looming, and Kohana braced himself, every muscle coiled, ready to defend the boy who was his entire world against the storm of hatred bearing down. Fulton's hand shot out, shoving Hinto hard, and the boy crumpled to the dirt, gasping for air. Kohana dropped to his knees, panic seizing him as Hinto's face paled, his small hands clutching his chest. "Breathe, son, breathe," Kohana pleaded, his voice cracking, fingers fumbling to loosen Hinto's tunic. Fulton laughed, a cruel sound that echoed over the plateau, and taunted, "Pathetic. Can't even stand." The militiamen closed in, blocking Kohana's path, their boots kicking up dust that stung his eyes. Hinto's lips turned blue, a faint wheeze escaping, and Kohana's world narrowed to his son's fading strength. He pressed a hand to Hinto's chest, feeling the erratic heartbeat, and whispered, "Stay with me, Hinto." Fury boiled inside him, raw and unstoppable, as Fulton's mockery rang in his ears. Kohana's eyes burned with tears. He refused to let fall, his love for Hinto clashing with the helpless rage of a father watching his child suffer. The plateau, once sacred, now felt like a trap, its beauty mocked by the violence unfolding under the rising sun. Kohana's hand found his knife, and he surged to his feet, blade flashing as he pointed it at Fulton's chest. "Touch him again, and you're dead," he growled, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. Fulton stumbled back, surprise flickering in his eyes, but he sneered, "You'll regret that, savage." Kohana's strike was swift, the knife grazing Fulton's arm, drawing a thin line of blood. The militiamen raised their rifles, barrels glinting, and Kohana's heart raced, knowing he was outnumbered. He scooped Hinto into his arms, the boy's weight light but precious, and bolted toward the trees. Fulton's shout rang out, "Get him! He's a criminal now!" Kohana's legs burned as he ran, branches snapping against his face, Hinto's shallow breath spurring him on. He glanced back, seeing the militiamen's shadows in pursuit, and clutched his son tighter, vowing to protect him no matter the cost. The knife still in his grip, Kohana felt the weight of his choice, a father turned fugitive under the unforgiving Wyoming sky. Kohana burst into the tribe's camp, Hinto limp in his arms, and stumbled into their tent. He laid his son on a woven blanket, hands shaking as he crushed dried herbs into a bowl. "Hold on, Hinto," he whispered, mixing the herbs with water, his fingers clumsy with fear. Hinto stirred, eyes fluttering open, but his breaths were shallow, each one a knife in Kohana's chest. A Shoshone woman, eyes soft with worry, brought a gourd of water, her hands steady as she helped Kohana feed Hinto the mixture. Kohana checked his herb pouch, heart sinking at how little remained, and murmured a prayer to the ancestors, his voice thick with desperation. Hinto's small hand found his, gripping weakly, and he rasped, "I want to be like you, Papa." Kohana forced a smile, brushing damp hair from Hinto's forehead, but inside he was breaking, haunted by the fragility of his son's life. The tense, dim light cast shadows on the walls, and Kohana sat vigil, every creak outside making him flinch, fearing the militia's approach. Horses snorted outside the camp, and Sheriff Baxter's voice boomed, "Hand over Kohana, or we'll burn this place down." Nawat, the elder, stepped forward, his weathered face unyielding as he faced Baxter's posse. "Kohana is one of us. You have no right here," he said, voice firm despite the rifles aimed at him. Baxter waved a wanted poster, Kohana's name scrawled in bold, and sneered, "He's a criminal now." A young warrior, eyes blazing, shouted back, but Baxter's glare silenced him. Nawat raised a hand, urging calm, and told Baxter, "Leave our land." Baxter tossed the poster to the ground, its edges curling in the dirt, and rode off, promising to return. Nawat's gaze turned to Kohana's tent, heavy with worry, knowing the tribe's protection came at a cost. Inside, Kohana overheard, his heart torn between gratitude and guilt, clutching Hinto's hand as the weight of being hunted settled like a stone in his chest. Under moonlight, Kohana slipped into town, his hood low, and knocked softly on Laura's door. She opened it, her face pale but determined, papers scattered across her desk. "Hinto needs medicine," Kohana said, his voice raw with urgency, eyes pleading. Laura nodded, fetching a small vial from her shelf, and promised, "I'll get more from the doctor." Kohana recounted the clash with Fulton, his fists clenching as he spoke of Hinto's fall. Laura's eyes sharpened, and she said, "We can fight this legally. I've seen their land claims." "Their lies." Kohana hesitated, the idea of trusting a white lawyer foreign and risky, but Hinto's coughs echoed in his mind. He agreed, his voice low, "For my son." Laura handed him the vial, her hand lingering on his, a silent vow to help. Kohana slipped back into the night, the medicine clutched tight, hope flickering like a fragile flame against the darkness of his fear. In the council tent, Nawat's voice was stern, his eyes boring into Kohana. "You met the white woman. Why?" he demanded, the air thick with suspicion. Kohana stood tall, heart pounding, and explained, "Laura's helping us keep our land. Hinto needs her medicine." Nawat's brow furrowed, his voice low. "Our ways don't bend to their laws." A warrior, face hard, muttered, "He's betraying us." Kohana's chest tightened, the accusation cutting deep, and he said, "I'd die for this tribe." "You know that." Nawat leaned forward, his gaze searching, and said, "Prove it, Kohana." "Our trust is not given lightly." Kohana nodded, the weight of their doubt heavy, but his thoughts were with Hinto, whose life hung on his choices. As he left the tent, the warriors' whispers followed, and Kohana felt the sting of being caught between two worlds, his loyalty questioned by the people he loved. Kohana carried Hinto through the dark, his son's head resting against his chest, and reached a hidden cave high on the plateau. He laid Hinto on a bed of pine needles, wrapping him in a blanket to ward off the chill. "We're safe here," Kohana whispered, though his eyes scanned the entrance, wary of pursuit. Hinto stirred, asking, "Is this the sacred place, Papa?" Kohana nodded, telling a story of their ancestors' spirits guarding the land, his voice soft to soothe Hinto's fears. The boy's coughs grew harsher, echoing in the cave, and Kohana's heart ached, knowing the herbs were running low. He lit a small fire, its glow dancing on the walls, and sat beside Hinto, watching his chest rise and fall. Hinto slept, but Kohana stayed awake, the cave's silence amplifying his dread, every shadow a reminder of the militia hunting them beyond the stone walls. In a lamplit barn, Fulton met Harlan, their voices low as they pored over a map of Shoshone land. "We'll call it unused," Fulton said, smirking, his finger tracing the plateau. Harlan slid a stack of cash across the table, saying, "Speed it up. My cattle need that grazing." Fulton unfolded a forged report, its lies claiming the land was barren, and chuckled, "They'll be gone soon, Mrs." Fulton lingered at the door, her face pale, hearing their plan to unleash diseased cattle. Fulton barked at a worker to prepare the sick herd, his greed glinting in the dim light. Harlan leaned back, sipping whiskey, and said, "We'll triple our profits." The barn's air was thick with conspiracy, and Mrs. Fulton slipped away, her hands trembling, knowing the Shoshone's fate was being sealed in that shadowed room. Outside, the wind howled, as if mourning the land's betrayal. Kohana left the cave at dusk, his breath misting in the cold as he searched for herbs to ease Hinto's coughs. Near a stream, he stumbled on a rotting cow, its stench sharp and unnatural. Frowning, he knelt, scraping soil near the carcass into a small pouch, suspecting foul play. A wolf's growl echoed, its eyes glinting in the shadows, and Kohana gripped his knife, heart pounding. He spotted a patch of rare yarrow, its white flowers glowing faintly, and harvested it quickly, whispering thanks to the land. Backtracking, he sniffed the soil sample, a sour tang confirming his fears of disease. Hinto's frail face flashed in his mind, urging him to hurry, and he ran back, the plateau's silence heavy with secrets. As he reached the cave, Kohana's chest tightened, the weight of protecting his son and their land pressing harder. The dead cow a grim warning of threats lurking beyond the sacred ground. A rustle broke the night, and Kohana froze, peering from the cave's mouth. A black horse snorted, its rider a shadow against the moonlit ridge. A scrap of paper fluttered to the ground, marked with one word, "Fulton." Kohana snatched it, pulse racing, the cryptic note stirring unease. Hinto stirred, mumbling, "Was that a horse, Papa?" Kohana tucked the paper away, soothing, "Just the wind, son." Though his eyes scanned the dark, the rider vanished, leaving only hoofprints, and Kohana's mind churned, wondering if this was ally or trickster. He sat by Hinto, the fire's glow flickering, and studied the note again, its mystery gnawing at him. The cave felt smaller, the walls closing in, as Kohana grappled with distrust, his hand resting on Hinto's shoulder, anchoring him to the one truth he knew. He'd protect his son at any cost. In her cramped office, Laura pored over land records, her candle dripping wax onto the desk. A faded report caught her eye, its numbers forged to claim Shoshone land as barren. She traced the lies, heart sinking at the betrayal. A clerk, passing by, whispered, "Be careful, Miss Laura. They're watching." She nodded, slipping the report into her satchel, her fingers trembling. Gideon's shadow loomed in the doorway, his cold stare pinning her, and Laura's breath hitched, but she forced a calm smile. She left, clutching the satchel, and began drafting a letter to a federal agent, her pen scratching urgently. Back home, she locked the door, the weight of her discovery heavy, knowing she was risking everything to help Kohana, driven by a flicker of justice burning in her chest. Kohana slipped into the camp at twilight, his hood low, and found Nawat by the fire. "Hinto's worse. I need help," he said, voice thick with worry. Nawat's eyes narrowed, asking, "What of the white woman's promises?" Kohana explained Laura's plan to fight legally, but a warrior scoffed, "We don't need their courts." Kohana's jaw tightened, the distrust stinging, and he pleaded, "Hinto needs medicine, please." Nawat sighed, handing him a small bundle of herbs, but warned, "Don't lose our ways, Kohana." Kohana nodded, guilt twisting in his gut, and left, the camp's murmurs trailing him. He clutched the herbs, Hinto's frail coughs echoing in his mind, torn between his tribe's pride and the desperate hope Laura offered, each step back to the cave heavier than the last. Laura walked the dusty road, her satchel heavy with documents, when Gideon stepped from the shadows, his grin sharp. "Stop digging, lady," he growled, grabbing her arm. Laura pulled free, heart racing, and said, "I'm just doing my job." His grip left a bruise, and he hissed, "Next time you won't walk away." She ran home, slamming the door, her hand shaking as she checked the satchel's contents. Sitting at her desk, she wrote another letter to the agent, her words fierce despite her fear. Gideon's threat lingered, a dark cloud, but Laura's resolve hardened. Picturing Kohana's quiet strength and Hinto's fragile smile, she sealed the letter, vowing to fight, her candle's flame a small defiance against the danger closing in. Kohana followed the stranger's note, creeping into Fulton's camp under starlight. Tents loomed, and he slipped into one, finding a stack of papers. His fingers traced a report on diseased cattle, his blood running cold at the plan to poison Shoshone land. A guard's boots crunched outside, and Kohana ducked behind a crate, heart hammering. He stuffed the report into his shirt, the paper crinkling loudly in the silence. Slipping out, he dodged a patrol, his breath shallow, and ran, the camp's lanterns fading behind him. Back in the cave, he read the report by firelight, fury rising at Fulton's cruelty. Hinto slept, unaware, and Kohana's resolve solidified, the stolen paper a weapon to save his people, its weight heavier than any blade. Hinto's fever spiked, his small body burning under the blanket. Kohana crushed the last herbs, feeding him the bitter paste, his hands steady despite the panic clawing his chest. "Stay with me, son," he whispered, wiping sweat from Hinto's brow. Hinto mumbled, "Will we keep the land, Papa?" Kohana forced a smile, saying, "Always," though his heart ached at the lie. The cave's damp air pressed in, and Kohana checked the empty herb pouch, despair rising. He held Hinto's hand, its warmth fading, and prayed, his voice breaking. The fire dimmed, casting long shadows, and Kohana's eyes burned, torn between fighting for the tribe and staying by his son, each cough a reminder of time slipping away. Fulton stormed into his tent, finding the papers gone, and roared at Gideon, "Find the thief!" Gideon nodded, reporting a shadow near the camp, likely Kohana. Fulton's face twisted, suspecting the Shoshone, and he snapped, "Double the patrols." Mrs. Fulton hovered at the entrance, her eyes wide, hearing their plan to blame the tribe. Fulton grabbed a rifle, vowing, "That savage won't ruin me." Gideon saddled his horse, eager to hunt, and Fulton scrawled orders to move the sick cattle. The tense air crackled with their rage, and Mrs. Fulton retreated, her silence a fragile shield against the storm brewing, knowing Kohana's theft had lit a fuse that could destroy them all. Kohana sprinted through the forest, the stolen report tucked against his chest, as malicious shouts echoed behind him. Bullets whizzed past, splintering bark, and he dove into a gully, mud smearing his face. A militiaman spotted his trail, yelling, "He's here!" Kohana's lungs burned, but Hinto's face kept him moving, his legs pumping. Hooves thundered, and a black horse cut through the trees, its rider loosing an arrow that scattered the pursuers. Kohana scrambled up, meeting the stranger's eyes, and gasped. "Thank you." The rider nodded, vanishing into the dark, leaving Kohana shaken but alive. He clutched the report, heart racing, the chase a stark reminder of the danger now hunting him and his son. Kohana caught his breath, hidden in a thicket, and faced the rider, his voice sharp. "Who are you?" The man, face half-shadowed, said only, "Truth saves your people." Kohana's eyes narrowed, catching a familiar scar on the rider's hand, but the man offered another note, pointing to Fulton's secrets. "Why help us?" Kohana pressed, but the rider shook his head, urging, "Trust the path." He rode off, hooves fading, and Kohana gripped the note, torn between gratitude and suspicion. Hinto's coughs echoed in his mind, and he headed back, the rider's words haunting him. The forest loomed, vast and unforgiving, mirroring Kohana's doubt, but the note burned in his hand, a fragile hope for his son and tribe. Laura hunched over her desk, the candle's flicker casting shadows as she scribbled a letter to the federal agent. Her pen traced the forged land report's details, each word a plea for justice. She sealed the envelope, heart pounding, and slipped it to a trusted courier under the cover of night. Gideon's shadow lingered in her memory, his threat tightening her chest, but she shook it off, picturing Hinto's frail form. At dawn, she learned the courier was ambushed, the letter gone, and despair clawed at her. She started another, her hand trembling, vowing not to fail Kohana. Locking her door, she whispered a prayer, the weight of her defiance heavy. The room felt smaller, Gideon's menace closing in, but Laura's resolve burned brighter, fueled by the hope of saving a boy and his people's land. Baxter's posse stormed the Shoshone camp, their boots trampling sacred ground as he bellowed, "Where's Kohana?" Nawat stood firm, blood trickling from a cut on his brow, and spat, "You'll never take him." Baxter backhanded him, and Nawat staggered, but his eyes blazed defiance. A young warrior lunged, only to be clubbed down, his cry piercing the air. Baxter's men bound Nawat, dragging him to a horse, while women shielded children, their sobs rising. Baxter sneered, "Tell Kohana his time's up," and rode off, Nawat's slumped form swaying. The camp fell silent, fear thick, but Nawat's courage lingered, a spark in the warrior's eyes. Kohana, hidden nearby, watched, guilt and rage churning, knowing his flight had cost his people dearly, his heart aching for Hinto and Nawat. Kohana slipped back to the cave, Hinto's coughs echoing off the stone walls. He knelt, brushing damp hair from his son's fevered brow, and whispered, "I'm here, son." Hinto's eyes fluttered open, weak but bright, and he murmured, "Tell me about the stars." "Papa." Kohana's voice cracked as he spoke of ancestors dancing in the sky, each word a shield against despair. He fed Hinto the last yarrow, its bitter scent filling the air, but the boy's breaths grew shallower. Kohana held his small hand, feeling its fading warmth, and prayed, tears stinging his eyes. The fire's glow dimmed, casting long shadows, and Kohana's chest tightened, torn between saving his son and fighting for their land, Hinto's fragile life the only light in his darkening world. Gideon kicked in Laura's door, his silhouette filling the frame as she froze, paper scattering. "Told you to stop!" he snarled, binding her wrists with rough rope. Laura struggled, her shout muffled by his hand, but her eyes burned with defiance. He dragged her to Fulton's camp, locking her in a musty shed, the door slamming shut. Alone, Laura worked at the ropes, her wrists raw, and scribbled a note on a scrap, tucking it into her sleeve. She pictured Kohana's quiet strength, her resolve hardening despite the fear gnawing her. Moonlight seeped through cracks, and Laura whispered, "I won't give up," her voice steady. The shed's walls loomed, but her hope for Hinto and justice kept her fighting. Each scrape of rope a step toward freedom. A Shoshone girl, eyes wide with urgency, reached Kohana in the cave, whispering, "Laura's taken." Fulton's camp. She slipped him Laura's note, its scrawled words pointing to a hidden stash of Fulton's papers. Kohana's heart sank, guilt flaring for dragging Laura into danger. But he memorized the note's directions. He asked the girl to watch Hinto, his voice thick, and she nodded, clutching the boy's hand. Kohana grabbed his knife, its weight familiar, and slipped into the night, the plateau's chill biting his skin. Hinto's coughs haunted him, each step toward Fulton's camp a gamble, but Laura's sacrifice fueled his resolve. The stars above seemed to pulse, urging him forward, a warrior torn between his son's life and a friend's freedom. Fulton met Harlan in a smoky office, their laughter cold as they planned the next move. "More sick cattle," Harlan said, tossing a bag of coins. Fulton nodded, checking the herd's logs, his greed glinting. Mrs. Fulton lingered outside, her hands clasped, hearing their plot to poison Shoshone grazing lands. Fulton barked at a worker to ready the cattle, his voice sharp with urgency. Harlan leaned back, saying, "We'll own this valley soon." The air reeked of betrayal, and Mrs. Fulton slipped away, her silence heavy with fear. Their plan solidified, a noose tightening around the Shoshone, and Fulton's eyes gleamed, blind to the storm Kohana was brewing with every stolen secret. Kohana crept into Fulton's camp, shadows cloaking him as he dodged patrolling guards. He found the shed, hearing Laura's faint struggle, and pried the lock open, heart racing. Laura gasped, wrists bloody, and whispered, "I'm okay." Check the main tent. Kohana helped her stand, his touch gentle but urgent, and they moved, ducking behind barrels. A guard's lantern swung close, and Kohana held his breath, pressing against the shed's wall. They reached the tent, but a dog barked, and Kohana froze, Laura's hand gripping his arm. He slipped inside, finding a ledger, and they fled, the camp's silence shattering as a shout rang out. Kohana's pulse thundered, Laura's bravery spurring him, the ledger a lifeline to expose Fulton's lies and save his people. Laura clutched Kohana's arm in the dark, whispering, "I saw Harlan's letters. They're in Fulton's desk." Her voice shook, but her eyes were fierce, urging him to act. Kohana rifled through the desk, finding a letter detailing the cattle plague, his stomach churning at the cruelty. He stuffed it into his shirt, the paper crinkling, and Laura nodded, her face pale but determined. A guard's boots crunched outside, and Kohana pulled Laura down, their breaths shallow. She pointed to another file, whispering, "That's their contract." Kohana grabbed it, his hand steady despite the fear pulsing through him. They slipped out, the letter burning against his chest, a testament to Fulton's greed and a spark of hope for Hinto's future. The black horse emerged from the fog, its rider beckoning Kohana and Laura to follow. Kohana hesitated, distrust flaring, but Laura urged, "He's helping us." They ran, the horse leading them to a hidden shack, its door ajar. The rider tossed Kohana a key, his face shadowed, and said, "Fulton's secrets are inside." Kohana unlocked the door, finding crates of documents, his heart leaping at the evidence. The rider vanished, hooves fading, and Laura whispered, "Who is he?" Kohana shook his head, gripping the key, its cold metal grounding him. They stepped inside, the shack's air thick with dust, and Kohana felt the weight of their discovery, a chance to save his people resting in the papers before him. Kohana sifted through the shack's crates, his fingers tracing letters between Fulton and Harlan. One detailed the cattle plague spread, each word a dagger to his heart, confirming the plot to ruin Shoshone land. Laura photographed a page with a shaky hand, her breath catching at the scale of betrayal. Kohana stuffed papers into his bag, their weight heavy with promise, but a lantern's glow flickered outside. He froze, pulling Laura behind a crate as voices neared. The door creaked, and Kohana's hand found his knife, ready to fight. Laura's eyes met his, steady despite her fear, and Kohana nodded. The documents their shield against Fulton's lies, a desperate hope to protect Hinto and the sacred plateau. The shack's door burst open, and Gideon's torch lit the room, his shout ringing out, "Burn it!" Kohana grabbed Laura, pulling her behind a crate as flames licked the walls. Harlan's voice barked orders outside, cold and final, demanding every paper destroyed. Kohana clutched the stolen documents, heart pounding, and whispered, "We can't lose these." He shoved half the papers into Laura's arms, their edges crinkling, and they crawled toward a broken window. Smoke stung their eyes, the heat searing, but Kohana's thoughts were on Hinto, spurring him forward. They tumbled into the night, coughing, as the shack roared into an inferno, its secrets half lost. Kohana's chest ached, rage and despair clashing, but the papers in his grip held a flicker of hope, a fragile weapon against the men torching his people's future. Kohana led Laura through the dawn, reaching the Shoshone camp where warriors gathered around a fire. He spread the salvaged papers before Nawat, voice steady. "This proves Fulton's poisoning our land." Nawat's eyes scanned the letters, his doubt softening, and he nodded slowly, a spark of trust igniting. A young warrior, once skeptical, gripped Kohana's shoulder, murmuring, "We're with you." Kohana's heart lifted, the tribe's unity a balm to his wounds, but Hinto's absence gnawed at him. He proposed a ceremony to rally the people, and Nawat agreed, his voice firm. The camp buzzed with purpose, women weaving banners, and Kohana felt the weight of leadership, his resolve hardening to protect the plateau for his son and their legacy. The ceremony began under a blood-red sunset, drums echoing across the plateau. Baxter's militia charged in, rifles cracking, and screams tore through the air. Nawat raised a hand, urging calm, but a bullet grazed his shoulder, blood soaking his tunic. Kohana dove, shielding him, as warriors clashed with militiamen, dust choking the sacred ground. A child's cry pierced the chaos, and Kohana's heart lurched, thinking of Hinto. Baxter roared, "Give me Kohana!" His pistol aimed at Nawat's chest. Kohana stood, fists clenched, fury blazing as he faced the sheriff, the ceremony's sanctity shattered. The plateau, once a haven, became a battlefield, and Kohana's pulse thundered, every beat a vow to save his people from the violence tearing their world apart. Kohana dragged Nawat into a tent, blood seeping through his fingers as he bound the elder's wound. He notched an arrow, firing at a militiaman, the twang of his bow cutting through the shouts. A warrior, face grim, joined him, hurling a spear that felled another foe. Nawat gripped Kohana's arm, gasping, "You're our strength," his words heavy with pride. The tent's walls shook, flames licking nearby, and Kohana's throat tightened, Nawat's trust anchoring him. He led Nawat to safety behind a rock, dodging bullets, and scanned the chaos, fearing for Hinto's cave. Kohana's muscles burned, but he fought on, his loyalty to the tribe a fire fiercer than the one threatening to consume their camp. Hinto stumbled from the cave, clutching a bundle of herbs, his face pale but determined. Kohana's heart stopped, seeing his son amid the battle, and ran, shouting, "Hinto, stay back!" The boy tripped, coughing violently, and a Shoshone woman caught him, her eyes wide with fear. Hinto pressed the herbs into her hands, gasping, "For Nawat!" before collapsing, his chest heaving. Kohana dropped beside him, cradling his son, tears blurring his vision as Hinto's breaths faltered. The woman fed Nawat the herbs, her hands trembling, and Kohana whispered, "You're so brave, son," his voice breaking. The battle raged around them, but Kohana's world shrank to Hinto, his fragile courage a piercing light in the chaos, tearing at his father's heart. Laura hid in the forest, her fingers stained with ink as she rewrote the letter to the federal agent. She tucked the salvaged papers into an envelope, her heart racing, and handed it to a Shoshone runner, whispering, "Don't stop." The runner vanished into the trees, and Laura prayed the letter would reach its mark. She crept back to the camp, dodging militia patrols, her skirt catching on thorns. The battle's din grew louder, and Laura's chest tightened, picturing Kohana's stand. She scribbled a backup note, hiding it in her boot, her resolve unyielding. The forest loomed, dark and vast, but Laura's hope burned, a quiet defiance against the violence threatening to silence the Shoshone's truth. The black horse galloped through the smoke, its rider halting before Kohana. "I worked for Harlan," he said, voice low, revealing his scarred face. He spoke of a witness, a clerk who knew Fulton's plans, and Kohana's eyes widened, hope flaring. "Why help us?" Kohana asked, voice sharp, but the rider said, "Guilt drives me." He promised to bring the witness, his horse snorting impatiently. Kohana gripped his hand, gratitude mixing with caution, the rider's truth a lifeline. The rider rode off, and Kohana stood, the battle's chaos fading as he clung to the promise of justice. Hinto's frail form urging him to trust this stranger's redemption. Kohana gathered the tribe at dawn, his voice steady as he proposed a protest at Fulton's ranch. Laura nodded, suggesting, "We'll call the press. The world needs to see." Nawat, arm bandaged, stood beside him declaring, "We fight as one." Warriors carved signs, their faces set, while women sang, their voices rising like a tide. Kohana checked the documents, their words his weapon, and Laura drafted a plea to the agent, her pen swift. The camp pulsed with defiance, children painting banners, and Kohana's heart swelled, the tribe's unity a shield for Hinto's memory. He touched a sage sprig in his pocket, vowing to honor his son by saving their sacred land. Fulton strode into the protest, his face twisted as he shouted, "You're liars!" at Kohana. The crowd, townsfolk and Shoshone, stirred, eyes on Kohana as he held up the documents, voice booming, "Fulton poisons our land." Warriors raised signs, their chants drowning Fulton's curses, and Laura handed papers to a reporter, her hands steady. Fulton lunged, grabbing Kohana's arm, but Nawat stepped between, blood staining his bandage. Townsfolk murmured, some nodding, as Kohana's words sank in. A militiaman raised his rifle, and Kohana braced, heart racing, the plateau's fate hanging in the balance. The protest swelled, a tide of truth against Fulton's lies, and Kohana stood tall, Hinto's courage burning in his chest. The rider's witness, a nervous clerk, stepped forward, clutching a ledger. "Harlan planned the plague," he stammered, showing letters that matched Kohana's. The crowd gasped, turning on Fulton, who paled, shouting, "He's lying!" The reporter scribbled furiously, and Laura pointed out Gideon, yelling, "He burned the evidence!" Gideon bolted, but warriors blocked him, their faces grim. The federal agent pushed through, badge glinting, and Kohana handed over the documents. hope surging. Fulton's eyes darted, his empire crumbling, and Kohana felt Hinto's spirit beside him, the truth a blade cutting through years of deceit. The plateau seemed to hum, its sacred heart beating stronger, as justice loomed for the Shoshone. Baxter charged through the protest, his malicious rifles glinting as he bellowed, "Kohana's mine!" Kohana faced him, heart pounding, as warriors formed a wall, their chants rising defiantly. Nawat, blood seeping through his bandage, shouted, "We stand for truth!" A militiaman fired, the bullet grazing a warrior's leg, and cries erupted from the crowd. Kohana tackled Baxter, fists flying, his rage fueled by Hinto's frail face. Townsfolk, stirred by the Shoshone's courage, blocked the militia, their murmurs turning to shouts of support. Laura handed the agent another document, her voice steady. "This proves their guilt." Baxter swung his pistol, but Kohana dodged, the plateau's dust swirling like a storm. Every clash a fight for their sacred land survival. The federal agent raised his badge, voice cutting through the chaos. "Fulton, Baxter, you're under arrest." Baxter lunged, but deputies pinned him, his curses echoing as cuffs snapped shut. Fulton's face drained of color, his shout, "This is a lie," lost in the crowd's roar. Gideon dropped to his knees, hands raised, as warriors glared. Kohana handed over the final papers, his chest tight with hope. The agent nodded, promising justice, and the Shoshone cheered, their voices shaking the plateau. Kohana searched for Hinto, heart racing, the victory bittersweet without his son's smile to share it. Hinto broke through the crowd, his small frame weaving past warriors, and threw himself into Kohana's arms. "Papa," he gasped, but his face twisted, hands clutching his chest. Kohana dropped to his knees, cradling Hinto, voice breaking, "Hold on, son." Laura rushed over, checking Hinto's pulse, her eyes wide with fear. Hinto's breath came in shallow gasps, his smile faint as he whispered, "You saved our land." His eyes fluttered shut, and Kohana's world shattered, a raw sob tearing from his throat. The crowd hushed, warriors bowing their heads, as Hinto's small hand went limp, his courage a fading light in the chaos of victory. Kohana carried Hinto's still form to the camp, tears streaming as warriors parted silently. Nawat, leaning on a staff, placed a hand on Kohana's shoulder, whispering, "He was our heart." Women lit sage, its smoke curling skyward, and sang a mourning song, their voices heavy with loss. Kohana laid Hinto on a blanket, brushing his son's hair, each touch a goodbye. A girl offered a woven band, Hinto's favorite, and Kohana tied it around his wrist, choking on grief. The fire crackled, casting shadows, and Kohana knelt, praying to the ancestors to guide his son. The tribe's love wrapped around him, a fragile comfort against the ache tearing his soul. Laura found Kohana by the fire, her eyes red, and sat beside him, silent at first. "Hinto was so brave," she said, voice soft, offering a letter Hinto had scribbled, full of hope for their land. Kohana read it, tears falling, each word a dagger and a gift. Laura vowed, "I'll help build a place to honor Shoshone ways." Kohana nodded, gratitude mixing with sorrow, his son's words burning in his heart. She touched his hand, a quiet promise, and stood, leaving him with the letter. The stars above glittered, and Kohana clutched the paper, Hinto's love a spark guiding him through the dark. The agent's voice carried over the town square, announcing Fulton and Harlan's convictions, their plot exposed. Newspapers splashed the story, headlines praising the Shoshone's fight. Warriors read the words, heads high, as townsfolk offered apologies, some with gifts of food. Kohana stood apart, the victory hollow without Hinto's laugh. Nawat raised a cup, toasting their land's safety, and the tribe cheered, their unity unbroken. Laura showed Kohana a sketch for a cultural lodge, her eyes bright with purpose. Kohana traced Hinto's name in the dirt, vowing to carry on. The justice won a heavy crown on his grieving heart. Kohana climbed the plateau alone, sage in hand, the wind whispering through the grasses. He knelt at a sacred stone, lighting the sage, its smoke rising like Hinto's spirit. "You're with me, son," he murmured, tears falling. The plateau's silence a gentle reply. A hawk soared above, its cry sharp, and Kohana smiled, feeling his ancestors' presence. He placed Hinto's woven band on the stone, a quiet offering, and prayed, voice steady. The sun dipped low, painting the sky gold, and Kohana stood, the land's heartbeat strong beneath him. Hinto's loss ached, but the plateau's safety was his son's legacy, a promise Kohana would keep. The tribe gathered under starlight, their fire casting a warm glow as Nawat named Kohana their guardian. Warriors gifted him a carved bow, its wood smooth, and cheered, their voices strong. Children held drawings of Hinto, his smile bright in their art, and Kohana's throat tightened, pride mixing with pain. A woman sang, her song honoring their fight, and the tribe joined, a chorus of resilience. Kohana accepted the vow, vowing, "For Hinto, for us." Nawat clapped his shoulder, eyes shining, and the camp pulsed with hope. Kohana looked to the plateau, its sacredness restored, his heart anchored by his people's love and his son's memory. Kohana led a group of Shoshone children to the plateau, teaching them to weave sage, his voice soft but firm. "This is our heart," he said, showing them the herbs Hinto loved. A boy asked, "Will Hinto see us?" And Kohana nodded, eyes misty, saying, "He's in the wind." Laura arrived, sharing plans for a lodge to preserve their songs, her smile warm. Warriors reported the land's safety, their faces proud, and Kohana felt Hinto's spirit in their strength. He carved Hinto's name into a tree, fingers steady, and stood back, the plateau alive with promise. The children sang, their voices rising, and Kohana joined, his grief easing, his purpose clear in their shared future. The Shoshone Plateau stood free, its grasses swaying under a vast sky, safe from Fulton's greed. Harlan and Baxter faced years behind bars, their cattle plague stopped cold. Kohana walked the land, tending horses, his hands steady as he lit sage for ceremonies. Laura broke ground on the cultural lodge, her laughter mingling with Shoshone songs, a new bond forged. Hinto's absence was a constant ache, but his bravery lived in every story told, every child taught. Warriors stood taller, their unity a shield, and Nawat smiled, calling Kohana their light. Kohana looked to the horizon, heart heavy but full, knowing Hinto's sacrifice had saved their sacred home, its spirit unbroken.